Hey everyone, just got some Showdown for you all today. I'm using a team that I built. It's kind of just like, I'd say it's balanced. It's kind of just got Scarf Lele, Rockstar and Heatran. Kind of following up with that, got Spike's Ferrothorn, and Palmine Raccoon, and Zed Move Blenders. So we're just going to go ahead and proceed into the game. A few things I want to take into consideration is that my opponent doesn't have very many ground immunities. They do have that Landers, and obviously that thing is bulky, but if I can get some sort of chip damage, stealth rock, iron bars, whatever, I can pretty easily just go for Earthquake whenever Landers is out on the field. Maybe I can even set up with it, although it looks like it needs a lot of damage on that Zygarde, depending on his moveset. So, we're going to go ahead and get into the game. My opponent's going to lead out with Zygarde, as I'm just going to lead with Coon. I noted that the Infernape and Landers were likely leads on my opponent's end, not so much the Zygarde. Um, I do threaten it with the potential Ice Beam, which is something I considered, as I just went for Scald. I wasn't sure if I'd break any potential substitute, but I do have Roar on the Suicune, meaning that I could phase it out before it becomes too big of an issue. Alternatively, I can boost alongside it and just break its substitutes. So anyway, I'm going to go for the Scald as my opponent just goes into Toxapex. We're going to see that do pretty negligible damage. I probably could have calced that just to confirm what kind of variant it was, but I'm just going to go directly into Latias. In case of like any sort of Scald, if they wanted to go for any sort of double switch into, I don't know, let's see what could have come up, because I had obviously Kun out on the field, and Pex obviously it kind of threatens it just if it has Haze. So maybe they could have gone into something to threaten my Latias, like that Scizor or something. But they're just going to go for the T-Spikes. Really, I can't blame them for doing that because if this Latias is not default, that's going to be putting a lot of pressure on both Suicune and Tapu Lele, particularly Tapu Lele, just because of its hit and run nature. So having like one Toxic Spike up, I believe, which does more for each knockout that I get, whereas 2 layers would obviously punish me if I was trying to sweep with it late game. So we're going to see that my opponent is going to opt to switch out, as I predict the Scizor to come in, try to get a Mega Evolution going, and I'm just going to go to Heatran. So at this point it's pretty safe to assume that rocks are going up on my end. I don't really think this sort of team on my opponent's end is going to have superpower on Scizor, just because it's kind of, it looks like it needs it a lot for Latios and Latias. So I kind of associate that with a bulk, meaning that it probably, even if it does have superpower, it's probably not going to be doing too much to eat. And that's not very common. Like bulky superpower isn't very common to begin with. So we're going to see my opponent just goes directly into Infernape, not wanting to risk any sort of burn on the Zygarde, which is pretty important. So with that in mind, I know that my opponent is likely to just take any sort of... they're pretty much playing aggressively, so I can kind of start to do so myself. So I'm going to go right into Suicune, as my opponent actually shows me the Swords Dance on the Infernape. Now, that's a very uncommon set. Infernape as a whole is very uncommon, but we're going to see that my opponent actually has something in order, something to surprise me, as I'm pretty much going to stay in. I did not expect my opponent to stay in by any means, and I honestly thought this could have been Sash Ape, just because I was around like the 1500s when I got this. I think I'm still around the 1500s, but point being, they run sort of odd sets, and this very easily could have been Focus Sash, which is something I wanted to take care of, because I didn't want something to take a close combat, because Landers is not defensive. Tapu Lele is not going to appreciate that, just because although it 4 times resists, it's going to be taking a +2 attack. So I'm just going to go ahead and let my Suicune die to the unexpected Gigavolt Havoc. Following this, I can go directly into Latias, obviously on the Infernape, and I think I just go for the Psyshock this turn. Yes, that happens to be the case. my opponent just goes into Scissor. Right here, I have a pretty safe play in Ferrothorn. My opponent's going to show whether or not they have the U-turn, if they are predicting a Heatran. In either case, I think Roost is actually a pretty safe play on my opponent's part, just because it keeps this thing sort of healthy to check Tapu Lele, which my opponent is going to have to predict very carefully around, and they're also going to have to try to outstall the terrain in order to keep that at bay. So my opponent does go for the Roost, as I do get to bring in my Ferrothorn, and so at this point I'm basically able to set up my hazards and get as much damage on their team as possible. This does help me in pressuring my opponent's very limited answer to Landorus T, considering that mine is Z move, and it's probably going to be able to knock out theirs should I get a Swords Dance up. So actually, yeah, I do go for, never mind, I don't go for the Spikes, I go for the Leech Seed because I wanted to kind of make whatever switches in have an easier time, and if they wanted to go for a U-turn and bring in something like Infernape safely, I'd be able to get some sort of damage on that and throw it out. It'd also make things a little bit easier for the Latias, that I would most likely switch into it. So I'm just going to bring out my Latias on the Ferrothorn. We've kind of established that this thing does not have U-turns, so that makes this play a lot safer. We're going to see that Flare Blitz does like 30. It does leave me with a burn, but that's not going to be too big of a deal just because burn damage is halved if you don't recall. So basically I'm just going to keep this healthy. I'm going to go for the Roost. I do have a Heatran in the back. There's no point in going hard into Heatran because next time Infernape comes out, I'm probably going to be in a tough position unless I can bluff the Landorus play. Really, it's just not a good idea. So I do just go for the Roost on the obvious Scizor switch-in. So I'm pretty much going to go into Ferrothorn, knowing that if they do have U-turn, they probably would have gone for it. This also could allow me to scout for the Swords Dance, like the Swords Dance superpower combination, because I could bring out Lele on what I would expect to be a +2 superpower, and I could basically threaten it out with the Hidden Bar of Fire because of Psychic Terrain blocking priority. So I'm just going to go out to Ferrothorn. My opponent actually does have the U-turn, which is a pretty common set for Scizor. There's a reason Dugtrio is really high in usage. You know, there's a reason for a lot of things this tier. So I'm going to go ahead and go out to my Ferrothorn. Wait, I already had Ferrothorn. They're going to switch because they used U-turn. Let's see about that. So basically, I'm just going to go ahead and Leech Seed, I believe, or do I Spike? I decided to Spike following that game plan. Leech Seeding wouldn't have been a bad play. I'm actually going to Leech Seed next turn, I believe. If not, then the following turn, just to kind of keep my Ferrothorn healthy. I do want to keep it healthy for that Mega Alakazam that's lying in the back. Or not that Mega Alakazam, that potentially Sash Zam is what I'm kind of expecting. So I kind of want to pressure it. Obviously it's got magic cards, so I'm going to have to get damage on it accordingly before I can start to revenge it with Lele, before I can go for a sweep with Landorus T, etc, etc. And so by setting up spikes and threatening my opponent, I'm able to kind of push for that, and also the Landorus T sort of game plan. So at this point I'm going to go for the Gyro Ball. I guess I expected a U-turn into Infernape, or maybe even just a hard switch. I'm not sure that was like the best play to just go for Gyro Ball like that, considering it didn't really do much damage. Sure, it did get damage on the Landorus, but I'm also taking a considerable amount from the, what do you call it, from the Rocky Helmet that he's carrying. So I'm actually going to go for the Protect here. I haven't shown it all game, so I didn't really expect my opponent to predict that and go directly into Infernape. I figured they would probably just try to weaken the Ferrothorn, knowing that their team doesn't really deal with it all that well. Zygarde can set up on it, yes, but aside from that, doesn't really have means of getting chip damage on Ferrothorn because Ferrothorn can comfortably Leech Seed on U-turning Scizor, and what do you call it? their main play against it is going in for an ape. Otherwise, they have to get some sort of damage on it with Landorus. So, my opponent actually makes a prediction thinking that it would go into my Landorus T. I actually don't do that because Landorus is, like I said, kind of nice in this battle because they don't have very many ground immunities. So, just gonna go ahead and go for the Leech Seed. Like I said, they went for the Hidden Fire Ice. This puts me in a much better place, considering that Alakazam is probably not able to knock me out of this range, and that's assuming it does hit Focus Blast. So at this point I do have to consider whether or not I want my Ferrothorn or my Heatran to act as my primary answer to that Alakazam. So far they're both healthy. It looks like Heatran is probably going to be a bit safer to rely on if I do need to get that prior damage, which I should because Moonblast does not kill from full even if it isn't Sash Them, and Psyshock needs some sort of damage on it. So just gonna go for the Leech Seed on the Landorus because they because they decided to predict and got Leech Seeded. They're kind of they're pretty much forced into a position where they can't comfortably stay in. So they're actually going to go out to their Scissor because it's a lot safer than the Infernape, which is going to be a lot more beneficial for them in breaking my Heatran Ferrothorn core, as well as just weakening Latios in general and forcing basically momentum on their end because they would be bringing Scizor into a Lati that does not have Fire. So just gonna bring out my Heatran on what I was expecting to be a Roost. Obviously, if they U-turn, they would have gotten really worn down by the hazards. So I felt like it was pretty safe to assume that was a Roost that was going to come out. Obviously, this thing doesn't have a move to hit Heatran with, assuming it has Bullet Punch, which is a staple on Scizor in general. So that, what do you call it? I do go into Heatran. It's fairly safe to make that play. And I believe I just go for the Lava Plume, if I can get a burn on that, or no, actually go for Roar, never mind, I'm trying to shuffle my opponent's team around, maybe get some damage on Infernape, maybe make Landorus take Stealth Rock damage. That makes a lot more sense in hindsight, because any sort of damage I do get on this Toxapex is pretty much negligible, because my main ways of dealing with it are through Lele and Latios. Possibly Landorus T, but pretty much any sort of damage I get on it is not going to matter due to the ability in Regenerators. So Roar does make sense. I do drag in the Landorus T, which is nice because obviously it's 12.5% on it. At this point, I feel that my opponent's definitely going to go for the Earthquake, considering that I haven't really switched it into either of my Levitators at this point in the game, so I felt that it was fairly safe to go for that. And even so, they would be taking another round of Stealth Rock on entry, so I felt that was a pretty safe play to make. My opponent does end up going for the Earthquake, which definitely helps me out. So I do go for my Z move in Continental Crush just to pick off this Landorus. What do you call? We're gonna see that obviously it's gonna knock it out because it's weakened. It's at 44%, and I'm not even boosted. So at this point in the game, I'm actually going to swap out, because I kind of assumed that my opponent was Life Orb at this point in the game. The only reason they would bring out an Alakazam at this point is because they either have Hidden Fire Ice or they have Life Orb Psychic that can knock me out. So I'm actually going to go into my Ferrothorn. If my opponent wanted to predict this and go for Focus Blast, like they definitely could have. I just want to make that clear, so it's not like that was completely out of the question. Obviously, they could have done that, but I figured that they would have wanted to get some sort of damage on it, considering it's a threat to their team. So, like I said, they do just go for the Psychic. Fortunately, no special defense trap, meaning that I can threaten this Alakazam. I'm pretty sure Focus Blast wouldn't be able to knock me out, and even so, risking a miss would really be detrimental to my opponent, in that they need some sort of check against Tapu Lele in the late game. So at this point I'm just going to go for Gyro Ball. I feel like it's a very... oh no, I don't. Could have gone for Gyro Ball. but I decided to pivot into my Tapu Lele on a potential Focus Blast. I don't have Shadow Ball, so I wouldn't have been able to knock out the Alakazam. I would have been forced to pivot into something else, so I'm not quite sure why I had made that play. Obviously, my opponent does go into Infernape, which is, I guess, what I was expecting. What do you call it? Yeah, the fact that my opponent just wants to go into their Infernape on Infernape. That seems pretty safe to do for your lately. So, in that sense, it does make sense, but I'm not sure that it's entirely beneficial to my game plan as a whole. Just because had he stayed in with Alakazam, I wouldn't have had any sort of countermeasure. I would have had to pivot again, like I said. But either way, we do have the Lele versus Infernape matchup, and because terrain is up, because Scizor is very weakened, it's at, oh, it doesn't show because, what do you call it? Because I pressed pause. We're going to see that it's at 76. It's going to be a lot lower when it enters the field, meaning that Psychic is probably going to be a 2-hit KO. I've actually got Dual Stab on this, which is going to come into play later on. As we can see, that is an easy 2-hit KO on the Scizor. Obviously, it can't go for Bullet Punch, or, I mean it can, but it can't actually knock me out with that because of the terrain preventing that from happening. So, obviously, Zamik's going to come back in. At this point, I'm kind of thinking that it's Focus Sash, and so I'm actually going to opt to go into my, what do you call it? I think I'm going to Ferrothorn here. Either Ferrothorn or Heatran. At this point, it makes sense to, I'm not quite sure because both are threatened by Zygarde, so it's not really, I don't really know which made more sense to go for. I end up going into Heatran because it's a lot healthier, and I'm getting a little bit less mileage out of that, considering that they have both Toxapex and Zygarde, so I guess it makes sense that I do that, because at least, what do you call it? Zygarde is at least threatened by Ferrothorn if, in that if I do get a Leech Seed on it, it's going to be pressured to not substitute as much. Yes, it can still go for coils and stuff, and eventually get damage on my team, but it's going to be worn down very quickly. Considering that I also have Protect, it's definitely not a smart idea, so we're going to see that going into Heatran on what happened, or yeah, what ended up being a Shadow Ball. I'm kind of surprised my opponent didn't really take advantage of the Psychic terrain. They probably could have done a little bit more than that with Shadow Ball, just because Psychic is what? Psychic is 90, obviously times 1.5, times another 1.5, divide that by 2. I think that's stronger than Shadow Ball. I can comfortably say that. So anyway, I'm going to go out to Heatran. Obviously, my opponent is not able to knock this out because they're Focus Sash on their Alakazam. I'm not quite sure if I go for the Roar or the... do I have Toxic on this? I think I do. Rocks, Lava Plume, Roar, and Toxic I think is my set. If I had a Earth Power, I probably would have gone for it. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and go for the Lava Plume. Don't get a bird on the Zygarde, which is kind of unfortunate, but I can play around it because I still do have a Landorus that I managed to take very good care of. For situations like this allows me a little bit more of a risk-free option. Oh, actually, no, at this point I was willing to sacrifice my Heatran. That's why I stated I didn't predict anything, just said that if I sacrifice Heatran, I can go into Latios, which is a really big threat to my opponent's team. Obviously I can go for Psyshock and then follow up with the Draco Meteor, but Psyshock hits everything. So it makes sense that I did that, because obviously making sure that Zygarde doesn't have the substitute up is all I needed to do. So actually, yeah, it makes a lot more sense that I would just let the Heatran go. My opponent obviously tried to substitute up, expecting the Landorus play, but I do drag in the Alakazam, which is going to result in my opponent wanting to switch out possibly into that Toxapex, maybe the Infernape, although that thing is getting a lot weaker due to the hazards that I have laid up. So I'm not sure that that would be the best play when Toxapex is more available. But we're going to see that my opponent does go into the Toxapex. which is, I don't know if I get the burn, but it does 15%. I'm not sure how to interpret that damage. Does a little bit much, I would assume, for what do you call it, for Spadef, so I feel like it's safe to assume that's Bizdef. Anyway, my opponent is going to go for a Scald. I kind of thought I was max special defense with this heat run. We're going to see that the way I take the Scald, I'm definitely max HP, max speed, which is by no means a bad set. Obviously, I thought that Tapu Bulu was a pretty big threat when I made the team. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a reason to run that much speed on Heatran. So maybe I shouldn't have let Heatran take all this damage. Although I didn't expect it to be like 30%. I expected it to be a lot lower because I thought it was max Spadef. But in either case, it wasn't really a good play to go for the Lava Plume. Obviously, if I get the burn, I negate leftovers, which is kind of nice, but I still don't think I should have done that at all. So 64 I think is a good number to actually live a Focus Blast, but we're going to see that I decide that I don't value the Heatran, mainly because I don't have Protect, and further in terms of dealing with the remainder of his team, Zygarde included, is just a lot better, so I guess it makes sense that I'm playing this thing a little bit riskily, because I don't value it as much as I value the Ferrothorn. I don't want that thing getting burned either. Latias was a potential play. I'm not really sure what prevented me from doing that. Maybe just trying to maintain it at a decent amount of HP to live a Shadow Ball from Sajda. I don't think it would have done enough to knock me out after Rocks, so I think that was a pretty decent play. But I'm just going to go for the Roar, in comes Zygarde. That's really great because that's got one more substitute left, and Lele is, well actually, both Latias and Lele are looking a lot better. Also, I can play Ferrothorn and Heatran a little bit more passively in that I don't have to fear this thing coming in to set up substitutes as long as I take care of it right now. So they obviously are going to recover health with their leftovers, and at this point my opponent kind of gets what I'm trying to do in Sacrifice Heatran, just to get as much mileage out of it as I possibly can. I go to Latias here, obviously, because the Toxic Spikes are up. What do you call it? There's no really key reason to go into the Tapu Lele that doesn't have recovery. Zygarde was definitely a play, but I'm not sure that it would have knocked the Zygarde from that range, and having that at full to take on, or near full, was definitely instrumental in making sure that Alakazam does not sweep the remainder of my team. So, like I said, I'm just going to go for the Draco Meteor. I'm pretty sure I'm free to do that, considering that my opponent let their Stick type go. So at this point, I'm just going to go for Side Shock because obviously I already got the damage I need on Toxic effects. I'm pretty much getting some sort of good damage on whatever they decide to switch in. They actually decided to go Alakazam on, I guess, I don't know, I'm not sure that they were predicting Ferrothorn, because I had, obviously, this thing out on the field. Maybe they were predicting a Roost and just wanted to bring that in to pressure the remainder of my team. But still, it could have gone for the, what do you call it? Still could have gone for the Draco Meteor or Psyshock to break this thing's Focus Sash. So maybe they were trying to coax them -2 so that Zygarde might be able to set up a sub. It seems like a possibility just because Zygarde does have a decent amount of special defense, backed up by a really nice HP stat in like base 108, I believe. So definitely not a bad play on my opponent's part. What do you call it? But I do end up going for Psyshock just to finish off the Toxic effects, knowing that it's good damage on Infernape if it doesn't just make it out already with hazards. It's good damage on Zygarde if he decided to go into that. Obviously, breaking the Focus Sash on this thing is really nice. So the fact that I have Dual Stab is going to play kind of a key role in my game plan here, because at this point in the game I pretty much ran a damage calc that said that I can pretty much pick off the rest of my opponent's team with Psyshock. as opposed to Psychic. Obviously, I could have probably, or no, I don't think Moonblast would have actually knocked out Zen from that range. I think it's a roll, if anything. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and what do you call it? I think I switch out to Ferrothorn. Yeah, that makes sense. Because what do you call it? I have Blenderous as a fodder if I need to use it, and obviously if things get out of hand, I can just intimidate it and then go for Earthquakes until what do you call it? Things are looking better for me. So my opponent is going to go for the substitute. It's kind of a bit too late to get really to do a lot with Zygarde, pretty much to get the most use out of it, because it's been worn down by my fortunate phasing moves. It's also been worn down by the fact that it's used substitute. Obviously, hazards have played a pretty huge role in that. But yeah, so I have a Landorus T. He's shown the Protector right here, which leads me to believe that he doesn't have a whole bunch of speed on this thing. It's definitely possible that they're running T-Spikes with Protect, just because they don't have to run Toxic. And so, like, that doesn't really justify running max speed and HP, but sometimes that's done just because they want to help his Heatran, or near max speed, just enough for Heatran. But sometimes they do that because it allows them to avoid a taunt. It's also good for Tapu Fini, because you're able to either just get damage on it, or you can substitute up if you're expecting a T-Fog. So it's not necessarily a bad option on Zygarde at all. Anyway, I'm going to go for the Earthquake to break the substitute. 1,000 Arrows is going to do a clean 25 at -1 attack. What do you call it? I'm also pretty sure that that's Spida. In that it's because it's not offensive. I feel like that would have done more than 25 had it been offensive, even though it is -1. So my opponent's going to go for the Protect. It doesn't really matter what I decide to do, because at the end of the day, this thing is pretty much going to be out of range of substitute. They actually decided to switch into Toxapex, which is kind of questionable. I guess it's not doing much at all. I understand that. I'm definitely going to go for a Swords Dance, so I'm not really sure why they didn't go directly for that with the, because Zygarde's going to get beat up by hazards. The only thing my opponent can hope for is that I either miss Draco Meteor, or that they, I'm not quite sure, because they don't gain enough to substitute up on Ferrothorn, so I'm not quite sure why they didn't just let Zygarde go in exchange for 25% more in my Landorus T, so I don't know, it's kind of questionable. But they do sack the Toxapex, which wasn't going to be doing much more, and they do go for the Psychic with their Alakazam. They switch in to Revenge Kill. So, like I was talking about, having dual stab on Tapu Lele, on Scarf variants of Tapu Lele actually helped me in this instance, because it's pretty much going to be able to allow me to clean up the rest of my opponent's team. Yes, T-Spikes are up, but it's definitely insignificant in the outcome, being that I have Latias in the back with Psyshock and what do you call it? It's at 49, which could be kind of detrimental if my opponent successfully stalls out the terrain and actually has extreme speed, but I don't think that's likely at all, because you typically run Coil. I don't think they revealed that, but you typically run Coil on Zygarde. There's no real reason to just run Sub Protect, E-Speed, absent arrows. So they're just going to run, I guess they didn't have Mach Punch on the Inferno. Know that we definitely saw Flare Blitz. We obviously know that it has Thunder Punch because of the Z move. So I guess it's just running Close Call, right, as its other stab. So it's a secondary stab move. So yeah, that was a pretty good game. I feel like I played it well. I was pretty patient, which is pretty much what just like defines a good battle. I feel like if you just take your time and weigh out your options just to make a good decision, it'll pay off a lot. And that's not always done in Pokemon, just because obviously not everybody takes the game as seriously as those that do like to do that. And typically there are times where you just want to have fun with it, and sometimes you just do want to click buttons and just try things out. So I don't know. It's definitely a thing to look into. I think that's all I have to talk about. Yeah, we're at 30 minutes. Wow. Yeah, but that is 44 turns of battle, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But yeah, you know what? If you made it through 30 minutes of one battle, I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it.